The Helios Dawn drifted through the Carina shipping lane, its massive hull occasionally catching the light of distant stars. To any observer, the vessel appeared to be struggling, its port-side thrusters sputtering in an irregular pattern. Scorch marks and impact craters decorated its hull like battle scars, telling a story of a long-serving cargo ship that had seen better days. Chief Engineer Maria Torres stood in the dimly lit control room, her fingers dancing across holographic controls as she orchestrated their performance. She adjusted the power fluctuations with surgical precision, making them appear random while following a carefully calculated pattern. Each hiccup and surge was designed to attract exactly the kind of attention they wanted. Power fluctuation in Sector 7 complete, Torres reported, her voice barely above a whisper despite the ship's extensive soundproofing. Our energy signature now matches a failing Grade C Thomson drive perfectly. Captain Sarah Chen nodded from her position at the tactical station. The hard light displays around her showed multiple sensor readings, including one that tracked a vessel at the edge of their detection range. The unknown ship had been shadowing them for the past 3 hours, maintaining a distance that suggested it was trying to remain undetected. Life sign emanations, Chen asked, reviewing the latest sensor data. Lieutenant Park, their sensor specialist, adjusted his readings. Broadcasting at 30% capacity, Captain. To anyone scanning us, it'll look like we're running with a skeleton crew of 15, mostly concentrated in engineering and the bridge. He smiled slightly. The biomimics are performing perfectly. The reality was quite different. Sealed within the ship's specially shielded compartments, 45 special operations personnel waited in perfect silence. Each soldier had been chosen specifically for this mission, their backgrounds ranging from zero combat specialists to former pirates who'd turned their skills to military service. The Helios Dawn continued its convincing display of vulnerability. Its external cargo containers, genuine ones they'd borrowed from an actual shipping company, rattled slightly with each thruster misfire. The manifests broadcasted on standard frequencies showed a tempting cargo of rare earth elements and medical supplies, more than enough to attract the interest of any raiders in the sector. Movement from our shadow, Lieutenant Park reported, his voice taking on an edge of anticipation. They're adjusting course. Signature analysis confirms it's a Krex tar vessel, Shadowclaw class. Captain Chen allowed herself a small smile. The Krex tar were exactly who they'd hoped to attract. Known throughout 3 sectors for their brutal efficiency, they'd been raiding human shipping lanes with increasing boldness over the past standard year. Their attacks followed a predictable pattern. Isolate a vulnerable target, overwhelm its defenses quickly, and disappear before any help could arrive. Time to make ourselves a little more tempting, Chen said. Torres, initiate failure sequence Delta 7. The chief engineer's fingers flew across her controls. On the ship's port side, a series of small explosions blossomed against the hull, precisely calculated to look devastating while causing no actual damage. Emergency containment fields flickered and died, and the ship's already erratic movement became even more pronounced. Distress call ready, Captain, Communications Officer Rivera announced. Standard civilian encryption, priority 2. Chen checked the chronometer. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan. Send it. Let's make sure our friends out there know just how helpless we are. The distress call went out, its message carefully crafted to sound genuine, while being just desperate enough to make their hunters confident of an easy victory. Within moments, their sensors detected the Krex tar vessel adjusting its course more aggressively. They're taking the bait, Park confirmed, increasing speed and shifting to an intercept vector. Captain Chen watched the tactical display, her expression neutral but her eyes bright with anticipation. The Krex tar had earned their fearsome reputation through decades of successful raids, but they'd never faced a trap like this. Their very predictability had become their greatest weakness. All hands maintain emissions discipline, she ordered through the secure internal comm. Let them come to us. Everything depends on convincing them they're the predator in this scenario. The Helios Dawn limped onward through space, playing its role of wounded prey to perfection, while deep within its armored hull, humanity's finest warriors silently prepared to turn the hunters into the hunted. The message from the Krextar vessel cut through the Helios Dawn's communications with the subtlety of a plasma torch. Their translator rendered the guttural alien language into standard English, though the threat needed little interpretation. Human vessel. The deep voice resonated through the bridge. Your ship has been selected for acquisition. Power down your engines and prepare for boarding. Resistance will result in your immediate destruction. Captain Chen gestured to Rivera, who activated the prepared response protocols. The captain's voice, when she responded, carried just the right mixture of fear and desperate authority. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the merchant vessel Helios Dawn. Please, we're experiencing critical system failures. We have wounded crew members who need. She cut the transmission mid-sentence, exactly as someone would if their communication system was failing. In the Krextar language, the word for mercy was the same as the word for weakness. Their cultural database had been quite specific about that. Their weapon systems are powering up, Park reported, monitoring the Raiders' ship. Standard intimidation protocol. They're charging just enough to punch through civilian-grade shields. Chen allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The Krextar were following their psychological warfare playbook to the letter. Send the next transmission, Rivera. Let's give them something to savor. The next communication from the Helios Dawn was a masterpiece of deception. Rivera broadcast what appeared to be an internal communication accidentally sent on an open channel. Crew members arguing about surrendering, someone crying in the background, and the sound of machinery breaking down. Each second of that transmission contained encoded quantum data packets, activating the microscopic satellite network they'd seeded throughout the shipping lane over the past month. The satellites began mapping every centimeter of the Krextar vessel, feeding data directly to the special operations teams hidden throughout the Helios Dawn. Captain, the Krextar commander's voice came again, dripping with false concern. Your situation appears dire. Allow us to assist. We promise that compliant crew members will not be harmed unnecessarily. Chen's next response was a stuttering mess of pleas and protocol fragments, the kind of breakdown in command authority that the Krextar had come to expect from human captains. Please, we'll comply. Just, our engines, we can't power down safely. The containment field. In their shielded compartments, the special operations teams received continuous updates through their neural links. Lieutenant Commander Jackson, the ground force leader, watched a perfect three-dimensional representation of the Krextar vessel construct itself in his mind's eye. Their enemies' positions, weapon loadouts, and tactical vulnerabilities were being mapped in real time. The Krextar ship drew closer, its docking protocols initiating. Their confidence was evident in their approach vector. They weren't even bothering to maintain tactical positioning. Why should they? Their scans showed a critically damaged vessel with minimal life signs and no military-grade hardware. Their boarding parties are assembling, Park whispered, though there was no need for quiet. 23 signatures, standard raid configuration, 3 strike teams, heavy weapons, and shock troops. Chen watched the tactical display with the patience of a veteran hunter. The Krextar were about to deploy their forces exactly as predicted, spreading themselves thin enough to secure a merchant vessel while maintaining enough concentration of force to handle any resistance. Final transmission, she ordered. Make it count. Rivera activated the last communication sequence. This time, Chen's voice was broken by static and terror. Please. Cargo bay doors. Manual override. We can't. Engineering team. Oh God, there. The transmission cut off in a burst of static. The Krextar commander's laughter echoed through the bridge. Well performed, Captain Chen. We will make sure to mention your entertaining performance when we sell the footage of your surrender to the entertainment networks. As the Raiders' docking tubes extended toward the Helios Dawn's airlocks, Chen sent a single encoded burst to her hidden crews. The message contained just 2 words. places everyone. The trap was set. The Krextar were about to learn that humans had turned theater into a weapon, and their stage was about to become a killing ground. Captain Chen settled into her command chair and began the silent countdown to their unwitting guest's arrival. The first Krextar boarding team breached the Helios Dawn's outer airlock with practiced efficiency. Their armor-mounted lights cut through the dimness, revealing empty corridors stretching in both directions. Emergency lighting cast red shadows across the walls, making the ship seem like an abandoned ghost vessel. Squad leader Vexthal moved forward on three-toed feet, his helmet sensors scanning for threats. The ship's layout matched standard human cargo vessel specifications, but something felt wrong. The corridors seemed slightly wider than regulation, the corners a few degrees off from expected angles. Minimal resistance detected. He reported back to the Krextar command ship, proceeding to primary target zones. Their scans had shown the remaining crew clustered in the cargo hold, probably trying to protect their precious shipment. Typical human behavior. The second and third strike teams emerged from adjacent airlocks, their heavy weapons primed. The Krextar moved through the ship with the confidence of experienced predators, though the youngest among them kept swiveling their heads, unsettled by the silence. Deep within the Helios Dawn's true command center, Captain Chen watched their progress through a network of quantum-linked cameras. The raiders' positions were marked as glowing dots on her tactical display, spreading out exactly as predicted. Teams Alpha and Bravo are approaching the first intersection, Lieutenant Park reported. Team Charlie is moving toward engineering. Chen nodded. Initiate spatial distortion sequence. Let's make them work for their prize. The ship's revolutionary design began to reveal itself. Entire sections of corridor silently rotated, the movements so subtle that only the most sensitive instruments could detect them. The Krextar teams, intent on their mission, didn't notice that their paths were being subtly altered. Something's wrong with the navmapper, one of the younger raiders reported, checking his positioning system. These readings don't match the ship's broadcast schematics. Vexthal growled in irritation. Human technology is inferior. Equipment malfunctions are expected. But even as he said it, a nagging doubt crept into his mind. The corridors all looked identical now, and their path to the cargo hold seemed longer than it should be. In reality, the Helios Dawn's internal layout was a technological marvel, developed by the best minds in human engineering. Every panel could shift. Every corridor could seal or redirect. The ship was literally moving around the raiders, separating them into smaller and smaller groups. Team Charlie is now isolated, Park announced. Teams Alpha and Bravo are split into 3 subgroups each. The Krextar raiders, still unaware of their predicament, continued to advance. Their helmet readouts showed them getting closer to their targets, but they were actually being herded into prepared kill zones. One of the veteran raiders pressed his armored hand against a wall, his sensory appendages twitching. "Commander, the metal. It feels wrong. The density is." Silence. Vexthal snapped. "We are warriors of the Krextar. We do not fear human tricks." But it wasn't fear that would doom them. It was their pride. Their absolute certainty that they were the superior predators had blinded them to the trap they'd walked into. The corridors continued to shift, and now some of the raiders were beginning to realize they couldn't contact their companions. "Signal interference," a tech specialist reported. "Our comms are degrading." Chen's voice was steady as she gave her next order. "Activate the quantum field generators. Let's make sure our guests are properly isolated." Throughout the ship, hidden emitters came to life, creating localized fields that further disrupted the raiders' communications and scanning equipment. The Krextar found themselves operating in smaller and smaller bubbles of awareness, cut off from their command structure. "All teams are now in position," Park confirmed. "No group larger than 3 raiders. All escape routes sealed." The Krextar, who had begun this mission as hunters, were now effectively blind mice in a maze. They had walked willingly into a trap of unprecedented sophistication, their own tactical doctrine used against them. Captain Chen allowed herself a small smile. Prepare for Phase 4. Let's show our visitors exactly what kind of ship they boarded. The real hunt was about to begin. The Helios Dawn's engines roared to life without warning, the sudden acceleration sending several Krextar raiders stumbling. Their magnetic boots automatically compensated, but the momentary disruption was enough to shake their confidence. "Command, we need status update." Vexthal barked into his comm unit. Only static answered him. The veteran raider felt the first real stirrings of concern. In hundreds of boarding actions, he'd never encountered interference this complete. Captain Chen's voice cut through their confusion, broadcasting simultaneously through every speaker in every corridor. "Attention Krextar boarding parties. Welcome aboard the UES Helios Dawn. I'm afraid there's been a slight misunderstanding about who's hunting whom." The sound of hydraulics filled the corridors as hidden bulkheads slammed into place, sealing each section. The raiders' standard breaching charges wouldn't help them now. The walls were composed of layered graphene titanium alloys, specifically designed to resist their weapons. Multiple targets acquired. Lieutenant Park announced on the secure command channel. Foam deployment authorized in sections 7 through 13. The raiders in those sections barely had time to register the slight hiss from concealed nozzles before the specialized foam engulfed them. It looked deceptively harmless, like cleaning foam, but it had been engineered for this exact purpose. The substance hardened almost instantly around the joints of their armor, immobilizing them while leaving their life support systems functional. "What sorcery is this?" One raider screamed, his powerful limbs unable to break free. The more they struggled, the harder the foam became. In other sections, the empty corridors revealed their secrets. Panels slid away to expose weapon ports. The raiders found themselves targeted by non-lethal but extremely effective sonic weapons, calibrated to the exact frequency that disrupted their sensory organs. The cargo hold life signs. Vexthal realized too late. They were false. "Very good." Chen's voice came again, now tinged with satisfaction. "Though I'm disappointed it took you so long to figure it out. We've been studying your tactics for months. Your reputation for ruthless efficiency made you predictable." The few raiders who managed to fire their weapons discovered another unpleasant surprise. Their energy bolts were absorbed by the corridor walls, the special coating dispersing the plasma harmlessly. Human technology, it seemed, was not as inferior as they had believed. In the command center, Chen watched the systematic neutralization of the boarding parties with professional satisfaction. Status report. 17 raiders immobilized by foam deployments. Park responded. 4 contained by sonic barriers. 2 remaining groups are attempting to retreat to their entry points. Time to introduce them to our special operations teams. Chen ordered. "Lieutenant Commander Jackson, they're all yours." The raiders attempting to flee encountered squads of heavily armed humans emerging from hidden compartments. These weren't the scared merchant crews they were used to facing. These were elite soldiers who had trained specifically to counter Krextar combat techniques. Jackson's voice was calm as he addressed his teams. "Remember your training. Their armor is weakest at the joint seams. Non-lethal takedowns only. We want prisoners for interrogation." The remaining firefights were brief and one-sided. The raiders found their usual advantages neutralized by preparation and technology. Their thermal imaging was useless against the humans' adaptive camouflage suits. Their superior strength meant nothing when they couldn't move freely in the specialized foam. "Principal targets secured," Jackson reported several minutes later. "No casualties on either side. 23 raiders captured, as expected." Chen nodded, though her attention was already turning to the Krextar vessel still docked with them. "Excellent work, everyone. Commander Vexthal, I believe it's time you and I had a conversation about the future of piracy in this sector." The Krextar commander, now held securely in a containment field, could only stare in disbelief. His entire force had been neutralized in less than 15 minutes without a single death. It was a demonstration of power more effective than any amount of bloodshed. The hunters had become the hunted, and the galaxy's most feared raiders were about to learn that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology. It was their ability to turn their enemies' strengths against them. The tactical display aboard the Krextar mothership erupted with warnings as the space around them shimmered. 3 sleek vessels materialized from seemingly empty void, their stealth systems powering down in a carefully choreographed sequence. The UES Normandy, UES Phantasm, and UES Shadowblade, humanity's newest generation of hunter-killer vessels. Impossible, breathed the Krextar ship's second-in-command. Our sensors showed clear space. Nothing could hide from our quantum scanners. The answer came in the form of a transmission from the Normandy. This is Captain Marcus Way of the Earth Special Operations Fleet. Your quantum scanners are excellent at detecting conventional stealth systems. Unfortunately for you, we're not using conventional anything. The 3 ships had been shadowing the Helios Dawn for weeks, using experimental phase shift technology that kept them milliseconds out of sync with normal spacetime. It wasn't true cloaking, it was something far more advanced. Back aboard the Helios Dawn, Captain Chen watched through the command center's panoramic displays as the trap's final phase unfolded. Status of the Krextar vessel. Their weapons are powered but not targeted, Park reported. Shield generators are active but not optimally configured. They appear to be in disarray, Captain. Chen opened a channel to her counterpart on the raider vessel. To the acting commander of the Krextar ship, your boarding parties have been neutralized. Your tactical position is compromised. I suggest you consider your next actions very carefully. The response was a burst of untranslated Krextar expletives, followed by the high-pitched whine of their main guns charging. Before they could fire, the 3 special operations vessels executed a perfect triangulation maneuver, their own weapons already locked on critical systems. Perhaps I wasn't clear, Chen continued, her voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. The Helios Dawn is not a cargo vessel. We're a military-grade hunter-killer ship specifically designed to counter your tactics. Those aren't standard cargo containers attached to our hull. They're missile pods containing enough firepower to reduce your vessel to atomic particles. As if to emphasize her point, the innocent-looking cargo containers began to transform, their outer shells retracting to reveal rows of advanced weaponry. The Krextar ship's sensors now showed they were surrounded by enough ordnance to destroy a small fleet. Your reputation precedes you, Chen explained. 5 successful raids in this sector alone. You've taken ships, cargo, and lives with impunity. Did you really think humanity would simply allow that to continue? Captain Wei's voice joined the channel. Every raid you conducted was analyzed. Every tactic documented. Every weakness in your strategy identified. This operation was designed around your predictability. The Krextar's acting commander finally found his voice. You used our own hunting patterns against us. Precisely, Chen confirmed. Your tendency to target damaged ships, your standard boarding procedures, your reliance on overwhelming force. We used everything we knew about you to create the perfect trap, and you performed exactly as expected. The 3 special operations vessels tightened their formation, their weapons arrays glowing with barely contained energy. They had positioned themselves to exploit the known weak points in Krextar shield configurations. You have 2 options, Chen stated flatly. Surrender your vessel and face trial for your crimes, or discover firsthand how much humanity's military technology has advanced while you were preying on our merchant ships. The silence that followed was deafening. On the tactical display, the Krextar ship's weapon systems powered down, followed by their shields. A wise choice, Chen acknowledged. Captain Wei, you may begin your boarding operation. I believe our guests aboard the Helios Dawn have some interesting information to share about their operations in this sector. As the special operations teams prepared to secure the raider vessel, Chen allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The Krextar had believed themselves to be the galaxy's apex predators, never realizing they had become the prey in a much larger hunt. The message would soon spread through every pirate haven and criminal outpost. Humanity was done playing the victim. The hunters had become the hunted, and the stars themselves had new masters. The special operations teams moved through the Helios dawn like shadows, their adaptive combat suits blending perfectly with the environment. Lieutenant Commander Jackson led the first strike team, approaching a trio of trapped Krextar raiders who were still struggling against the hardened foam. "Remember your training," Jackson sub-vocalized through the neural link. "They're strongest at their core, weakest at their joints. Use their bulk against them." The Krextar warriors, each standing over 2 meters tall, had always relied on their superior strength and advanced armor. They'd never faced opponents who had spent months studying their every weakness. The foam had been just the beginning. In Section 7, Sergeant Maria Santos demonstrated why she'd been chosen for this mission. As a former Zero combat instructor, she understood how to use momentum in confined spaces. When a partially free Krextar warrior charged her, she didn't resist. Instead, she redirected its force, using its own armor's weight to slam it into the specially reinforced wall. The impact triggered microsensors in the wall panels, which instantly generated a localized magnetic field, pinning the raider in place. "Target secured," Santos reported calmly. "Their armor's power distribution systems aren't shielded against focused magnetic pulses, just like the intel suggested." Across the ship, similar scenes played out. The raiders discovered that their most advanced weapons were worse than useless against the humans' specialized defensive systems. Energy weapons were absorbed and dispersed. Projectiles were caught in localized gravity fields. Even their backup weapons found no purchase against the humans' reactive armor. "This is impossible," one Krextar warrior growled as his plasma cutter barely scratched a human soldier's chest plate. "Your technology is inferior to ours." Corporal Chen, no relation to the captain, smiled behind his visor as he moved inside the raider's guard. "Not inferior," he explained, striking precise points in the alien's armored joints with his shock baton. "Just different. We studied how your armor works. Every power conduit, every servo motor, every weak point." The raider collapsed, his armor systems completely shut down. In the ship's engineering section, the last organized resistance had barricaded themselves behind what they thought was a defensible position. They didn't realize that every corridor in the Helios Dawn could be pressure-sealed and environmentally controlled independently. Adjusting atmospheric composition, Lieutenant Park announced from the command center. "Introducing non-lethal paralytic agent calibrated for Krextar physiology." The Raiders' armor, designed to protect against traditional weapons, couldn't filter out the specially designed gas. Within moments, the last fighting group slumped to the deck, conscious but unable to move. Captain Chen watched the final takedowns with satisfaction. "Status report, Commander Jackson." "All boarders neutralized," Jackson confirmed. "Zero casualties on either side. Minimal damage to ship systems. The foam compound performed exactly as designed. They'll be stuck until we apply the dissolving agent." The special operations teams began securing their prisoners for transport. Each capture was documented meticulously. This operation wasn't just about stopping one group of raiders. It was about gathering intelligence on the entire piracy network in this sector. "You should feel honored," Jackson told the captured Vexthal as his team applied the dissolving agent. "Your reputation was so fearsome that we built an entire ship just to catch you." Everything about the Helios Dawn was designed specifically to counter Krextar tactics. Through the neural link, Chen addressed all teams. "Excellent work, everyone. Secure the prisoners in the holding cells. Commander Wei's boarding teams are about to begin their assault on the Krextar vessel. Stand by to receive additional prisoners." The raiders were marched to the brig in silence, their pride shattered more thoroughly than their bodies. They had come aboard expecting to find helpless prey, only to discover they'd walked into humanity's most sophisticated trap. In the end, it hadn't even been a close fight. Every advantage the Krextar thought they had, strength, technology, tactical superiority, had been turned against them. The hunters had been outmaneuvered not just physically, but strategically and psychologically. As the last prisoner was secured, Captain Chen allowed herself a small smile. Phase 6 was complete, and the galaxy was about to learn a vital lesson. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their strength. It was their ability to adapt, analyze, and overcome. In the Helios Dawn's high-security conference room, Commander Vexthal sat across from Captain Chen, his massive frame restrained by fields specifically calibrated to Krextar physiology. The room's displays showed real-time footage of his ship being methodically secured by Captain Wei's boarding teams. "You know," Chen began, sliding a datapad across the table, "we have you to thank for this operation's success. Your previous raids provided us with all the data we needed." The pad displayed detailed analyses of every attack the Krextar had conducted in the sector. Vexthal's secondary eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep distress in his species. "Our tactics were perfect, refined over generations of warfare." "Exactly," Chen replied. "Perfect, predictable, and ultimately flawed. You always picked isolated targets, always sent boarding parties in groups of 3, always followed the same search patterns." She gestured around them. "We built this entire ship around those patterns." Through the neural link, Lieutenant Park updated the captain. "Captain Wei reports full control of the Krextar vessel. Their databases are being decrypted now. We're finding connections to at least 7 other raiding groups." The commander's facial tentacles twisted, the Krextar equivalent of a grimace. "You couldn't have planned for everything." Chen's response was to activate a holographic display showing every movement his boarding parties had made. "Your teams went exactly where we wanted them to go. The corridors, the fake life signs, even the apparent malfunctions. Everything was designed to trigger your standard responses." "Impossible," Vexthal growled, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "Your reputation was your weakness, Commander. You were so feared that every merchant ship recorded everything they could about your attacks. Every survivor was debriefed. Every scrap of wreckage was analyzed. We knew you better than you knew yourselves." From the tactical station came another update. 6 more special operations vessels had decloaked near known Krextar staging areas. The operation wasn't just about capturing one raiding party. It was about dismantling an entire piracy network. "Your people's philosophy of rule through fear backfired," Chen continued. "You made everyone so afraid that they studied you obsessively. That fear turned into knowledge, and knowledge." She gestured at his restraints. "Well, you can see what knowledge became." Vexthal's shoulders slumped, a gesture of submission that would have been unthinkable hours earlier. "The others will learn from this. They will adapt." "No," Chen corrected him. "They won't have time. As we speak, operations like this one are being conducted throughout the sector. Your entire network is being dismantled simultaneously." The displays showed more footage. Other disguised military vessels springing similar traps. More Krextar raiders being systematically captured. The commander watched his species' reputation for invincibility crumble in real time. "We learned something crucial about the Krextar," Chen explained. "You don't adapt well to being prey. Your entire culture is built around being the predator. Once that dynamic shifts, you lose more than tactical advantage. You lose your cultural foundation." The truth of her words was evident in Vexthal's posture. His species' notorious fighting spirit had evaporated not because of superior force, but because humans had completely upended their worldview. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice carrying the weight of defeated generations. "Now, you provide us with everything you know about criminal operations in this sector. In return, we ensure your people are treated according to all interstellar conventions. Then perhaps we can discuss how the Krextar might find a new role in a galaxy that no longer fears them." As if to punctuate her words, another update came through. 3 more Krextar vessels had surrendered without a fight, their commanders having received word of what happened to Vexthal's invincible ship. The message was spreading faster than light itself through the criminal underworld. Humanity was done being prey. They had turned the art of hunting into a science, and the galaxy's most feared predators had become case studies in their own defeat. Commander Vexfall, avatar of his species' martial pride, finally understood the full scope of what had happened. The humans hadn't just beaten them, they had evolved beyond them. 3 months after the Helios Dawn operation, Captain Chen stood in Starbase Delta's observation deck, watching as another group of captured raiders was processed through the security checkpoint. The scene had become almost routine. Former predators learning to live in a galaxy where their fearsome reputation had evaporated like morning mist. Latest intelligence report, Captain, Lieutenant Park said, joining her at the window. He handed her a datapad showing statistics that would have seemed impossible a few months ago. That's the 15th raiding party to fall for variations of our trap. The Helios Dawn's success has revolutionized anti-piracy operations. Chen nodded, scanning the numbers. After their initial success, Anthropic Fleet Command had authorized the construction of an entire class of hunter-killer vessels, disguised as vulnerable merchant ships. Each one incorporated lessons learned from the original operation, becoming even more effective at turning raiders' tactics against them. "How's our friend Vexthal adapting to his new role?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Surprisingly well," Park replied. "His insights into raider psychology have been invaluable in refining our strategies. Turns out when you strip away the warrior culture, some of them are quite practical thinkers." The former Krextar commander had made an unexpected transition from prisoner to consultant, helping human forces understand and counter criminal operations throughout the sector. His intimate knowledge of raider networks, combined with human tactical innovations, had proven devastating to illegal operations. "Incoming transmission from the UES Trickster," Park announced, checking his comm unit. "They'd just sprung another trap in the Carina sector. 3 raider vessels captured intact, crews surrendering without resistance. Our reputation precedes us now." Chen allowed herself a small smile. The Trickster was one of the new hunter-killer ships, incorporating all the successful elements of the Helios Dawn, with several new innovations. Its very name was a psychological weapon, broadcasting humanity's new approach to space warfare. "The criminal networks are adapting," Park continued, "but not fast enough. Every time they develop new tactics, they find we've already anticipated them. The hunters have become the hunted, and they're not handling the role reversal well." Through the observation window, they watched as a new merchant vessel departed the starbase. Like many others now, it was impossible to tell whether it was genuinely vulnerable or another trap waiting to be sprung. This uncertainty had become humanity's most effective weapon against piracy. "Status report from Commander Wei," Park added. "The Krextar prisoners are providing valuable insights into criminal operations beyond their own species. It seems our demonstration of superior strategy has impressed more than just the raiders." The impact of the Helios Dawn operation had rippled through galactic society in unexpected ways. Other species, impressed by humanity's innovative approach to combat, had begun seeking military and technological partnerships. The humans' ability to turn apparent weakness into strength had earned them respect far beyond their territorial boundaries. Launch records show 3 more hunter-killer vessels leaving Earth's shipyards next week, Park noted. "The Deception, the Siren, and the Masquerade, all built on our success." Chen turned from the window, her expression thoughtful. "Have we received any new raid reports in the past 2 weeks?" "No, Captain," Park replied with satisfaction. "The mere possibility that any vulnerable ship might be a trap has effectively paralyzed most criminal operations in the sector. They can't tell which targets are real anymore." As if to illustrate his point, a clearly damaged freighter limped past the observation window, trailing plasma from its port nacelle. Both officers watched it in silence, knowing that somewhere in the criminal underworld, potential raiders were watching too, wondering if it was truly vulnerable or yet another carefully crafted trap. "The greatest victory," Chen mused, "isn't winning the battle. It's making your enemy afraid to fight in the first place." The freighter disappeared into the darkness of space, carrying with it the new reality of interstellar travel. In a galaxy where every easy target might be a predator in disguise, the old rules of space warfare had been permanently rewritten. Humanity had transformed from prey into something far more dangerous, a species that turned its hunter's strength against them, making the very act of predation too risky to attempt. The age of the space raiders was over, replaced by a new era where appearances were deceiving, and the smartest hunter of all was the one that appeared to be prey.